crisis solution, fusing racism, sexism, and Islamophobia with pop culture, trash-talking, and idiocy. Trump's counter-revolution is not only a question of hindering the resistance which Occupy and Black Lives Matter mobilize, it's also an attempt to put the skids on any autonomous revolutionary potential well into the future, even if this means giving up on certain customary ideas of tolerance and openness. If then, I mean, this, in a certain sense, Trump is a protest against neoliberal hegemony, against Clinton and Obama, etc., against the notion of political normality in the US, the program Clinton ran on. But, and this is important, if then Trump is an expression of protest, we are talking about a counter-protest, a response to a genuine systemic critique. It's a protest against a protest. A response to a genuine systemic critique that Trump and the nationalist faction of the capitalist class that supports him, that they want for the world to prevent from getting the wind in their sails. It's about circumventing Black Lives Matter's critique of structural racism being coupled to a critique of American capitalism and the capitalist mode of production as a whole. So preventing Occupy and Black Lives Matter fusing. While Trump is a blank rejection of Black Lives Matter, he's a partial recuperation of Occupy's critique of the financial crisis and bailout of the banks. That was at least kind of like one of the promises of Trump's campaign. So Trump drew on the critique of neoliberal globalization that Occupy articulated. But of course, Trump puts a completely different spin on it. While he lashes out at Wall Street, he'll allow the banks a free hand notwithstanding, and has already sought to initiate big tax cuts for business, but really has the knives out for the previous government, which according to him has let American jobs disappear to Mexico, China, and other places. He nimbly succeeds in establishing a cross-class alliance between select victims of the financial crisis, namely the white middle class, and protectionist capitalists. The latter are, of course, like Trump, completely indifferent to the growing inequality. Trump seldom talks about wages, for example, but complain about how difficult it is to make profit. It's here that Trump comes into the picture. He's able to canalize white middle class fear of social decline and draws together the growing dissatisfaction among parts of the capitalist class with the current regime of accumulation. Trump therefore becomes a critic of deindustrialization and neoliberal globalization. The problem, of course, is that Trump short-circuits the analysis and points to specific actors as enemies of the American people. It's Washington that's the villain. China's the enemy. It's Mexican immigrants who are stealing our jobs. It's Europe that's to blame for the slump. There is then a short-circuited critique of neoliberalism in Trump's rhetoric. So in reality, he's making systemic faults concrete. He's identifying structural historical changes. He's trying to identify them and make them concrete by blaming China, Mexican immigrants, etc. This is like a basic feature of fascism. Washington migrant workers, trade deals, and supranational organizations are the problem, and return to the homeland the answer. A state-backed national economy can, according to Trump and his cohorts, rein in globalization. The project is thus to re-establish national sovereignty politically and economically. A reactionary nationalism or new fascism is the way forward. A strong state that cracks down on unrest while simultaneously commencing large construction projects. This is very difficult, which can get people into work. The dream is that the crisis of American industrial capitalism can be overcome by building up the national economy, provoking trade wars and excluding aliens. And so this was the attempt to argue in favor of this reading of Trump as a protest against the protest, as a counter-revolution. And I'll end by trying to look a little bit closer at the discourse or rhetoric, or what we perhaps with Arthur Benjamin can talk about as the aesthetics of Trump. Where I would propose which I would propose to talk about as late fascism or late capitalist fascism. Trump narrates a dramatized history of an endangered community's decline. The notion of the people is central to this narration, to this story. Throughout his campaign and in office, Trump speaks of the people and the nation as a spiritual community that is distinct from the state, and even from the population that's normally seen as constituting the country. It's America and not the United States of America Trump's talking about. He does not say make the US great again, but make America great again. America for Trump being a kind of mystical figure that does not include all the people that are in the US, but includes something different, both more and less than the actual persons in the country. This is not just because of the existence of a whole mass of people, such as illegal immigrants, who do not belong to Trump's American community, but also because of the existence of America's indigenous population, African Americans, and all the groups Trump has mocked and ridiculed during and since the campaign. Trump is explicitly not talking about the diversity of the country, its cultural and religious differences. He speaks of the people as a unified subject, the people as one. It's in this sense that America includes more than just the actual bodies in the US. Trump is constructing a symbolic and spiritual community, one that transcends the actual individuals present in the country at this moment. This is like a mystical national community that is connected to, but also distinct from the United States of America as a state, as a geographical and territorial entity, and from the mass of people who live there today. So America, Trump's America with 3 Ks, is more than the US. The US is just a state, while America is a spiritual entity, a mission, a destiny. I think that, but we can come back to that kind of like one of the scaled down basic definitions of fascism, according to British theoretician of fascism, Roger Griffin. He defines fascism as palingenetic ultranationalism, and palingenetic ultranationalism is precisely characterized by this idea of a threatened national community that has to be restored. It has to be restored by any means necessary. And this national community is of course racialized. It depicts specific individuals within a nation state. So the overall picture is one of crisis and breakdown. These are the characteristics of the present situation. This is an ideal milieu for Trump's late fascism, because fascism is of course a crisis phenomenon. This was the case in the 1920s and 30s, and this is the case today. And like in the 1930s, the origin of the new fascism, Trump's late fascism, is a financial crisis. That is a steep economic crisis that started in 2008 7 in the US and quickly spread to the rest of the world. This is the context. But of course, we also have to factor in the longer historical trajectory of racism and settler colonialism in the US, where Trump is a reactivation of a tradition of white supremacy. A history that includes settler colonialism, slavery, and the class alliance between white working class and the capitalist class. The class alliance analyzed by people like Du Bois in the early 20th century. In a situation of economic crisis, fascism appears as a solution that derails real revolutionary alternatives and secures the capitalist mode of production. The basic economic structure always remains untouched. This is the sense in which fascism is counter-revolutionary. It has a rhetoric of regime change. Trump is a protest, is challenging protest, is mediating protest against Washington, against Wall Street, but is in fact characterized by a pseudo-revolutionary rhetoric. Think of Trump's attacks on Wall Street. Fascism always gets agitated about the corrupt system, attacking it and claiming to be a restoration of an original order. But of course, fascism always protects capital. Fascism is in that sense a revolution against revolution. It appropriates language and slogans from anti-capitalism, but embeds them in a nationalist narrative where the fundamental contradictions of capitalism remain invisible and are replaced with a focus on racial and cultural differences. So this the attempt to translate structural, the abstract laws of capitalist accumulation into concrete enemies. The anti-systemic rhetoric and attacks against neoliberal globalization are thus in fact an expression of a fight within capitalism that has to do with different factions wanting to steer the economy. In that sense, fascism is counter-revolutionary and is not at all interested in initiating fundamental change, but instead wants to secure the privileges of certain groups who fear social declassification, and, very importantly, make sure that any kind of capital negating get-go is eliminated, derailing potential revolutionary perspectives. Since being elected, Trump has been busy trying to fulfill his campaign promises. It has proven difficult, but he's slowly getting there, dropping climate change as a national threat and replacing judges on all levels, imposing the Muslim ban time and time again, ejecting immigrants in large numbers, cutting taxes, working hard to destroy Obamacare, pulling out of international organizations, rescinding deportation protection for hundreds of thousands of people, announcing, implementing a move of the US Embassy to Jerusalem, and of course, pulling out of the Iran deal and imposing going to trade war with China. Trump seems intent on doing his best at creating an extremely volatile political atmosphere, where he attacks the media and judiciary in different parts of the administration. For a long time, he simply preferred to have an empty administration, keeping many crucial US government jobs unfulfilled. But he's also busy firing the person he appoints whenever they appear weak. The list is already long: Michael Flynn, Sean Spicer, Reince Priebus, Anthony Scaramucci, Sebastian Gorky, all of them were kicked out, and even Steve Bannon left. His administration is a chaotic beehive of competing factions, seemingly unable to collaborate. But this is probably the way it's supposed to be. Trump prefers chaos. The news is fake news. The media are not just dishonest, they are, in Trump's words, the most dishonest people on earth. At one point, Trump announced a dishonest media award. The media are, in his words, the enemies of the American people. If someone believed that Trump would change his discourse once he was in the White House, they were sorely mistaken. The rhetoric from the campaign has just continued. Racism, sexism, ultranationalism are still the ingredients of Trump's American greatness. It has been difficult for Trump. He's put a lot of effort into it, and he's trying to, and he's slowly cutting away on the Affordable Care Act. He's slowly pulling it apart, no matter the cost for poor and sick people in the US. The travel ban, which he spent a lot of time imposing in the first couple of months, has had its own life. Trump tried to impose it several times, only to be met with protests and legal challenges. But he's continued in different ways to try to target what he calls Muslim countries. And the meaning of the ban is, of course, clear for everybody to see. Trump wants to get rid of what he calls the terrorists, meaning Muslims. Muslims and immigrants simply have to go. Not only immigrants from what he calls terrorist countries, but also immigrants from what he calls African shithole countries, in places like Haiti and other Central American countries. As Trump put it in a meeting in the Oval Office in January 2018, I quote, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come over?" Instead suggesting bringing immigrants from Norway instead. Yeah. The proposed 2,000-mile-long wall to Mexico, of course, has yet to be built. But Trump is trying desperately to get funding from it from Congress, including going to lockdown, etc. The initial phase of the border wall will cost $18 billion US. The money is to go towards 316 miles of new fencing and reinforcing 400 miles of existing barriers. If Trump succeeds, more than half of the border with Mexico will have a wall by 2027. It's impossible to keep up with Trump and his bizarre racist and misogynist rants. But it's also important not to get caught up in an analysis where we compare Trump to some kind of imagined normality before Trump, as if Trump's late fascism is the exact opposite of the policies pursued by Bush and Obama. That Trump is a late fascist does not mean that Bush Jr., Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders somehow incarnate democracy. Or at least we have to be fairly precise when we then define democracy. The political solution to the Trump problem is not that we remove Trump and get back to some kind of before Trump situation. The crisis was already there. Trump has merely accelerated the crisis, no doubt. But there's no normality to return to. That's the shocking truth that Trump reveals. So it's not that it's not that easy, unfortunately. Opposing Trump in favor of normal politicians and supporting democracy. That's not a solution, although that's, of course, seems to be the campaign tactics of the Democratic Party, with a view to the next election, of course. Because fascism is not the opposite of democracy. Fascism, including this late fascism, fascism emerges in crisis-ridden national democracies when there's a need to create order and prevent alternatives from emerging, more radical alternatives. Fascism should thus not be regarded as an abnormality, but a possibility inherent in any national democracy. And when democracy as a political form is embedded in a nation state, there's always the risk that national democracy closes on itself and wants to protect its citizens from what it perceives as external or internal threats. The national home is threatened and has to be made safe and orderly. Fascism is, in other words, imminent to national democracies. Hitler and Mussolini did not dissolve democracy, they undermined it from within by making it incapable of functioning, thus creating a need for a strong leader who has to clean up and restore to kind of imagined original order. Trump does not need paramilitary troops in the street, although he's clearly in favor of them marching and running down leftist protesters. But he doesn't need paramilitary troops in the street. Trump is fully capable of creating legislative chaos himself, and thus undermining existing political authority, producing the need for a different kind of authority, an authentic American authority, that being Trump himself, of course. The first year of Trump's presidency shows that he's leading through chaos. This is late capitalist fascism at work. It's messy, it's overwhelming, it's planned chaos. Thanks. That's it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, very good.
Shall we rest for a while?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah, sure.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.